Hey folks, on this episode of The Naturalist, I'm in Adams County, Ohio, to take a hike to Buzzardroost Rock. So let's go. Buzzardroost Rock Preserve is a pretty well-known site in Adams County. If you've ever been in southern Ohio, Adams County is a center of nature in the state. It's just a very biodiverse area. It has lots of nature preserves, largely preserved through the work of the Nature Conservancy, but also with our state park system and other institutions like the Cincinnati Museum Center. So Buzzardroost Rock is actually a partnership between the Cincinnati Museum Center and the Nature Conservancy that protects and manages this particular preserve, this interesting preserve. And so here's a little historical marker that discusses the dedication of this preserve as a national natural landmark back in the 60s. All right, so this has been long recognized as a special place. And here's a map, just some signage here to start the hike. And we're at a parking area right here. And we're going to take a hike that's about the round trip of about 4.4 miles. It's mostly an out and back, but you have some optional loops there that you can, or loop there that you can do. And we're mostly going to skirt along a ridge top. And on our way to Buzzardroost Rock, we'll pass through some areas that have some cedar glade type prairies, historical farms that converted to prairie, and then make our way out to Buzzardroost Rock itself, which is a beautiful overlook of the valley that includes Ohio Brush Creek at the base. Okay, so here's just a nice view of Buzzardroost Rock in the fall. I'm here on May 9th. It's about a 72-degree day, and we're gonna basically take a nice leisurely walk down the trail and see what we see. And, you know, warblers are starting to migrate through the area. Trees are pretty far along in their leaf out. There should be lots of flowering plants to see, butterflies. We'll see what we see, okay? There's always the opportunity for here for birds, mammals, reptiles, and hopefully we'll run into some of that stuff. All right, before I head down the trail though, I'm already seeing a nice little plant that I want to show to you before we even go, because I'm sure we'll see it the whole way along the way. And that's this plant here. This is called lyre-leaved sage. Okay, this plant forms a basal rosette of leaves that are kind of in the shape of a lyre, L-Y-R-E. And it grows as that rosette for a while, and then puts up this flowering spike, and with these nice bright light purple flowers. And it's a real nice, it's always flowers in May, flowers for a pretty long period, and it's one of our native salvia species. So this is called lyre-leaved sage. And in the area as well, we have milkweeds coming along. These are most likely common milkweed, but there are several other species of milkweed that grow around here. Okay, so that's just a little starter to kick off our walk, which will continue in that direction. Well, at the edge of the parking lot, before I even got down the trail, I found something interesting I'd like to show you here. So this plant you see in front of you here is one of our native leguminous plants. This is Partridge pea, and there's a whole bunch of seedlings of it along the edge of the parking area here at the Buzzardroost Rock. And I want to show you an interesting phenomenon that this plant displays, and that's its touch sensitivity. Okay, so this plant is a legume. It has compound leaves with multiple leaflets, and it is touch sensitive. So what I'm going to do is just basically stimulate these plants for about 10 seconds. And then we're going to watch those leaves and what they do over about the next minute. All right, so let me just do it, and then I'll keep talking. All right, so again, I'll just hit all of them here. And then when we're done, I'll show you ones that have not been stimulated. Okay, so I'm just kind of hitting these things. This isn't damaging. Okay, I think that's probably enough. Let's just watch what these leaves do over the next minute or so. Now, legumes are known for being very mobile plants. All right, they have a little structure at the base of their leaves and leaflets that permits the leaflets and leaves to fold or bend down in response to various kinds of stimuli. Either mechanical stimuli like that, or they will fold up at night when it gets dark. Okay, so there's a variety of stimuli that will induce it. And some of them are really good at it and quick at it. Okay, so there's a species called Mimosa pudica, for example, that is known for rapid touch sensitivity. That is, you touch it and it folds up immediately right in front of your eyes. And so, but partridge pea does this as well, just at a little bit of a slower rate than mimosa does. And I think by now you should see how much these things have closed. Okay, the leaflets have folded on themselves, in some cases almost the whole way closed. And, you know, the question is, why do they do that? And one answer might be to sort of escape from herbivores. If you have a grazing herbivore or a caterpillar or whatever that runs into these things and starts to feed on them and they kind of fold up and disappear, the insect or the mammal will move on. Okay, and that's actually been shown with mimosa, that seems to be one of the primary reasons that mimosa is so touch sensitive. The caterpillar lands on it, it kind of folds up, and those kinds of plants that do it get less herbivory than those that don't. So there you go. Those are pretty well folded up, wouldn't you say? Okay, here's one that's still open. So take a look at that. Isn't that cool? Okay, who says plants can't move? I've walked about a quarter mile down the trail just to put a little distance between the parking area and the highway there into the preserve proper. I just want to give you a feel for the early parts of this trail. You go through woodland and mixed mesophytic, mixed ages. Okay, and so I just, you know, there are some big trees, there's some big white oaks I passed, big tulip trees, hickories, and there are patches of younger trees and areas that you can see were open more recently. And so I just want to take a walk and show you a little bit of the diversity of the early habitats you see here on the trail. So this section of the trail has an abundance of ashes, actually. Okay, they're blue ashes. That's the survivor in the face of emerald ash borer. There are black gum seedlings. I'll try to show you a large black gum tree here in a little bit. Red buds in this area with all these red cedars and red buds and dogwoods in this area. This obviously was an area with you see the younger trees, shade intolerant trees. This had been open probably 20 years ago, 25 years ago. This probably was a little open patch that has grown in since being let go, okay? Now, there are prairie remnants and prairie patches throughout this preserve, but they require maintenance, okay? They need to be cut or burned periodically to stay a prairie. So this area where you're seeing all these red cedars and things was undoubtedly open. Probably could have been maintained in kind of a prairie-like opening if they had wanted to, all right? But they let that patch go. When I say they, talking about the managers of the property, the Nature Conservancy and such. But they do manage a lot of prairies in this preserve system, and there are dozens of them, okay, to keep them as prairie. Cedar glade prairie, open prairies, and but that you can't just let that happen naturally usually, aside from a few circumstances. Here's a nice spot to get a feel for the woodland along the trail as you go. See pawpaws, by the way. I'm seeing plenty of those. young ones. And here's another one of those world milkweeds. This one's much more pinkish than the ones we saw over there. All right, the others were quite white. This is a nice, white oak dominated woodland at the moment. Of course, there were lots of ashes. I'm seeing the large white ashes that are dead, but there are young trees still, as usual. Here's some dead ones across our path. And just to show you what killed them, you just look at a dead tree and you look for those feeding galleries, feeding patterns there, and that's a hallmark of emerald ash borer. And it really took those things out. Butterflies flying. There's a swallowtail that's probably a spicebush swallowtail in the distance there. I'll try to get up close to butterflies today. It's a great place for insects. It's sort of an overcast day, so butterflies like to fly when it's sunny. Here right in the middle of the day. So it's a good time for them, but it's a little more overcast than they like. But they would be flying today. They should be. Here's a few things. I pointed out some of these in the past. This one, okay, that's the leaf of bloodroot. I showed you that at Fort Hill early in the season. So this is long past flowering, but these leaves will persist for quite a while through the season. But all around it is one of these Appalachian herbs that people seek and would collect and harvest and sell for its purported medicinal properties. And that's this stuff right here. Okay, it kind of blends in with everything around here. That's a Virginia creeper. All right, that's called golden seal. And golden seal is called that because of its golden root, if you were to dig it up. And that root has purported medicinal properties. So it's one of these Appalachian herbs that, like ginseng, that people would collect and sell as a little extra money. And we are in Appalachian, Ohio, and there certainly would be collectors of this sort of thing. Hopefully not here in this preserve. You're not allowed to do that in preserves and state parks and things without permission. But this is the part of the state where people do go out after things like golden seal and after ginseng, and even collecting moss off of logs to use in floral displays and things like that. That's actually a woodland crop that people collect. So that's just a little bit about what I've seen so far. Well, I just turned the camera off from my last little segment, but here's a nice little plant I'd like to show you. This is maidenhair fern. And it's one of our delicate, lacy, more, I guess you could say, pretty ferns. It has a very dark black stems to it. Fronds that come out in a very interesting pattern, okay, from that stem. And it will persist a long time as well. Nice woodland fern called maidenhair fern. And again, this is one that you can get in the horticultural trade now because it's so attractive to plant in your own yard. Okay. Now we're in part of the preserve with some bigger trees, some hefty tulip trees there, probably approaching 80 to 100 years old, and some quite large beech trees. There's an American beech in front of us right there that's quite big, certainly quite old. And I see a number of those around this particular spot. And I'm starting to really see the evidence of the bedrock here. The stream I crossed runs through, over and through the bedrock. It's a couple of main types of bedrock here. A couple different types of limestone and shale that you can encounter along the way. And so we're still in the limestone regions of Ohio. And to the left of me, and I'll show you as soon as I get past a few trees here, I'm starting to see the evidence of those limestone outcrops. And again, Buzzardroost rock is just a big outcropping of limestone. Dolomitic limestone in particular, I've talked about that kind of limestone before. as being tough. And that's why it kind of forms a lot of rock outcroppings and cliff faces, because it persists longer than the softer limestones that might underlie it. All right, so there's a kind of a block right above me and showing its face. Here's a tree I have not pointed out to anybody on this series yet. This is called basswood. Okay, these really large leaves. Okay, one thing about basswood, this is Tilia americana, is that those uneven leaf bases you're seeing there. Okay, that's common to the species. And they're pretty big leaves. They like moist soils. They grow fast. And one thing they really do is sprout prolifically from the base. If there's any kind of, insult to the tree at all that impacts it. Like here's a small tree that was killed for some reason, a small basswood, and a whole bunch of sprouts came out around the base. Okay, that's a common trait of basswood. All right, so, and there are relatives of basswood. Of course, basswood can be grown in a horticultural trade, but there are relatives that are in the trade of horticultural trees in the same genus called lindens. Okay, large or little leafed lindens, and very common, landscaping suburban trees. Okay, so on we go. Something that's getting attention this year is the large emergence of periodical cicadas, where two broods are going to be emerging at the same time, or are emerging at the same time right now in parts of the US, like parts of the Midwest. Southern Illinois, for example, is going to have the emergence of two broods of 17-year periodical cicadas at the same time. All right, so people are expecting madness. Now, I like cicadas. I've witnessed several emergences now. We had one in my area in 2021 of brood X or brood 10. And in fact, we did a study on it that's just being published about the fertilization effect of the dead bodies of cicadas on plant growth. But here I am in Adams County, Ohio, and I see a periodical cicada that's emerged here that I don't think should be emerging. So let's take a look at it, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. So there it is, folks. That's a periodical cicada. And why that's out here, I'm not entirely sure. Now, periodical cicadas can come out at the wrong time. Okay, they can mistime their emergences and come out either early or late. Now, in southern Ohio, far southwestern Ohio, there will be an emergence next year, 2025, of periodical cicadas. This could be one that's messed up, came out a year early. There is commonly a 4-year early emergence of periodical cicadas, kind of a bump in the emergence of some of them 4 years earlier than they should. And there's a lot of questions about why that happens. But I've got to look at the range maps of the broods, and a brood means one large population of these cicadas. Again, these things live underground for 17 years, generally in this area. And then that's whenever it's year 17, they come out of the ground as adults. All they basically do is mate and lay eggs and start to cycle all over again. But occasionally they got mistimed. There's a few mistakes. So this is probably one of those anomalous cicadas that's out early. But I'm tickled to see this thing because I love cicadas. I did a lot of news pieces and interviews when cicadas came out in 2021 in my area. And I had done one in 2017 when there was a 4-year early emergence in my area as well. So that's about periodical cicadas. And this is a little bit about my excitement in seeing that thing. All right, so that was fun. That cicada, by the way, it was a small cicada, and it was probably a dwarf cicada, which would make it Magicicada cassini. And there are, in any emergence, usually 3 species or even more that can emerge at the same time. So these large periodical cicada emergences aren't just one species. It's a coordinated effort of 3 or more species in most large emergences. So just given the size of that one, that's probably that particular species. And so I just wanted to add that little bit of detail to what we just saw. Here's a really good spot to show you that limestone bedrock where the stream basically has cut down and is running just along the surface of the bedrock. That's all sheer bedrock right there. There's no soft sediments at all. And it's basically like a nature's water slide the whole way down this twisty and turny little gully. That'd be a lot of fun actually to ride through that. You can see where these, this is an inspiration for those water slides at parks and such, spots like this. Really cool. Okay, just gliding right along the limestone bedrock. Now we're about to enter the main prairie opening here on the way to Buzzardroost Rock. Again, this is an area that had a little farmstead at one time, probably back in the 1800s. I don't know how far back it stretched or when it was last farmed. And there's still some remnant barbed wire and stuff I'm seeing around here. But this area behind me, and we'll take a walk through it, is an area that the Nature Conservancy and the Museum Center have chosen to maintain as a prairie after farming. So this would have been opened up to farm, small Appalachian hillside farm. But prairie species hang on in these areas and have persisted in these openings. And if you choose to maintain them, you can keep these little prairie pockets and prairie patches around. So let's just take a look at what that looks like and take a walk through it. I'll let the camera run for a while here. Okay, so obviously it's much more open, right? Much less woody vegetation. They manage this undoubtedly with burning periodically, perhaps some cutting, I'm not sure. Okay, but you see the standard colonizing species around the edges of red cedars, some pine species, Virginia and pitch pines. You notice the soil as I'm walking here is very reddish. That usually is an indicator of a high iron content. Okay, see this very reddish soil in the paths here. Okay, that's kind of reminiscent of and sort of telling of where we are. We're in far southern Ohio, and reddish soils kind of go along with the south. Okay, so here's a view. We have tall meadow rue starting to flower out there. I see bedrock barely under the surface of the soil there. That's one thing that can help a prairie patch or prairie opening like this stay open without having trees on it, are very thin soils. So it is somewhat naturally maintained. All right, so just because trees can't get a foothold in these very thin soils, and small plants are what can persist. Here's a little choice you have. This is where the little loop is involved. So we're going to take the left side, probably come back around the other side on the way back. But I'm going to keep my eyes open here for reptiles, skinks, and fence lizards, which I've seen in this area before. So let's keep our eye open. And then there's a plant species I see in bloom in the distance, and I want to get up close to you to show you. I see small butterflies, kinds of things that are just going to be too tough to catch on camera. But let's see what we see across here. Again, these little hillside farms historically would have grown, a mixture, probably a mix of crops, vegetables. There was tobacco growing in this area of Ohio. In fact, there still is some tobacco growing in southern Ohio. So that very well could have been grown here. And what else can we see? We have black haw viburnum. Okay, this is a species I showed you just a few weeks ago from Hocking County, which is an hour and a half to 2 hours north of here. And that species was flowering when I showed it to you just about 2 weeks ago, less than 2 weeks ago. Here it's setting fruit already. So those are the fruits of black haw viburnum. They'll turn a blue-black in the fall, and birds love those. Little thicket here of that, and what else is in there? I think I see some hawthorn back in there, little thicket. We call these thickets. Sometimes you have species like plum, dogwoods. I see some dogwoods. Nice little thicket of fruit-bearing trees that birds relish. Okay, so I'm seeing a little bit of the plant I'd like to show you. I want to see some better specimens, so I'll be back to you when I find a nice specimen. Just in terms of the grassland here, the open area, you know, a trained eye like mine's reasonably well trained. I see a mix of both non-native, farmland related grasses and forbs, along with native species. So as I glance around this particular patch, and this is an area, I believe in this area is where some of the structures were associated with this little farm, I see Timothy hay, I see barnyard grass, I see perennial ryegrass, I see some fescue, I see red clover, here's red clover, okay, not native, pretty, but not native. I see white clovers out here in the distance. I see some thistles. Here's white clover. Okay. I see some thistles, some probably native and some non-native. But a mix like an area like this, I can see a mix of all of that. And the idea is to try to favor the native species as much as you can. And that's where the fire management really comes into play. So some of the more shallowly rooted plants, like some of the non-native grasses, they can't tolerate that as well as our native grasses. And our native grasses in here would include things like little blue stem grass is certainly a major one in parts of this little prairie. One more bit of detail about that cicada, just because it was so fascinating to find it, is that in southern Ohio and far southwestern Ohio, we do expect cicadas in 2025 in this area. And that would be brood 14. Broods are given names, numbers for to indicate large populations that all have the same emergence schedule. Now, the two big broods that are emerging this year are brood 19 and brood 13. And so those will not impact Ohio, or not really near Ohio. Illinois and Michigan, about as close as we'll get. But that leads me to believe that cicada that we saw is just what we call a straggler. It's come out early. It should have come out next year, okay, but it was a little off schedule. There's undoubtedly countless others doing the same thing out there. That one just happened to be right beside the trail, and I happened to be walking by and noticed it. All right, so those straggling cicadas are an interesting phenomenon, but just mistimed. All right, so on to Buzzardroost. As we make our way to Buzzardroost, I'm now on a narrow ridge top, drier. You'd see it's steep down to the left of me. Over the little peak over there, it's steep down to the valley floor below. So we're now paralleling Ohio Brush Creek on these narrow, higher ridge tops, about 900 feet in elevation. And in southern Ohio, on these dry ridge tops, if you followed my series, there's a certain species we plan to see. And here it is, our friend, the chestnut oak. All right. So these are very abundant along these little ridge tops on the way to Buzzardroost. And so I'll get back with you, but yeah, this is also the high point, around 900 feet. The valley floor to my right below is, I think, at about 500 feet, 550. So we are 300, maybe 350 feet above the valley floor at the top of these ridges. Okay, we'll be there soon. Well, I got an amphibian for some diversity. That's a toad. Just hopping around the ground here. Okay, he peed on me when I picked him up because I disturbed him a little bit. But I'll set him down in a second. So that's just a nice American toad. All right, on your way. Go ahead. Yeah, you're cool. Okay, bye. I'm now approaching the promontory that is Buzzardroost Rock, a chunk of dolomitic limestone that juts out from the ridge here, forms a point with an overlook. And to my right, I can start to see the valley now of Ohio Brush Creek, some farms down there. And on the left is more of the preserve system, so nice wooded area. One thing I've noticed right away as I've stepped out here is an increase in wind speed. And I can see in the shape and stoutness of the trees around me that wind is an ever-present stress that these things, face all the time. It's always going to be windy out in this point, and trees exposed to wind or mechanical stress tend to grow more stoutly, not as tall. They get a lot thicker. They can often be bent away from the wind. So the windward side is reduced and the leeward side is extended. Okay, so here's some signage. Okay, and that particular signage is a picture of a very famous botanist, Lucy Brown. Lucy Brown, who did lots of floristic studies throughout Ohio, is an iconic botanist that we should be, we are privileged to say is from Ohio. Okay, she's did a lot of work on describing the flora and fauna of all of Ohio, but especially of southern Ohio and Adams County. So Lucy Brown is quite famous in the legions of botanists. All right, so now we're going to start down a wooden staircase that's going to take us out to Buzzardroost proper. And of course, around me we have Virginia pines, more of our chestnut oaks. Here's a serviceberry. I showed you serviceberries at Fort Hill when they were in flower. Here's one that's starting to set fruit. Okay, they make an edible fruit. I've never tried it, but that's it. That's the start of serviceberry. And maybe I'll just try that this year. Here's our deerberry I showed you a couple of episodes ago. Vaccinium stameneum. Now that makes a fruit that is inedible for humans, or most things. It's a green fruit, actually, and it's not edible, at least not by humans. All right, as I make my way out here, to the right is a mass of greenbrier, a native plant. Looks like it might be invasive, but it's not. And again, these trees are all, my interest in bonsai is in part inspired by these, these tough, stout, gnarly trees that hang on in these more extreme environments with high winds and weather and deer herbivory in some cases, and have to hang on. And so these trees are actually much older than they might appear based on their size. Okay, these are all fairly short trees here, because they just can't be tall. You can't be a tall, skinny tree out in the windy outcropping like this. And so I really hand it to these things. Okay. Oh, there went a skink. Oh, I'll go slower in case I see another one. These skinks in southern Ohio, parts of Ohio, they like to, anywhere there's a boardwalk, they like to come out on boardwalks to warm up. They have long blue tails. They're about 6 inches long. Oh, there's an eastern fence lizard. Okay, I'm going to try to get close to that. Well, if you can see that. He's just laying out here. It's kind of a coolish day. I hope you see that now. And he's just out here on this boardwalk warming up. So there we go. 2 reptiles within 4 feet of each other. That one's here for it. Let's see if else we can do. Now, the locals have a nickname for this that is not coming to mind right now, but I will add that in text once I figure that out. But there we go. That's a fence lizard. Some people are surprised that there are native lizards and skinks and things in Ohio, but there are. And that's one on full display. I'm gonna let you go. All right, now we're heading out to Buzzardroost proper. It's nice. I'm here on an overcast day, which is probably not a bad idea. It's plenty bright, so I don't think it's going to rain anytime soon. It's not too hot. And everything is absolutely lush in the flush of spring growth out there right now. That's a whole canopy of leaves that are brand new. Okay? Chestnut oaks, white oaks, red maples. I see a sweet gum over there. There are ashes, and there we go. There's our buzzard. Out in the distance there is what locals might call a buzzard. It's actually called a vulture. Okay, turkey and black vultures would live in this area, rest up here. And, you know, every time I'm here, I've seen them. So this is an appropriately named place, but they are not actually buzzards. That's just a common name. I think buzzards is a little bit of a funnier, cuter name for these things than vulture. You know, when someone wants to call you a buzzard, you old buzzard, that's not so bad as being called a vulture, right? Here's a little signage out here. Okay, so I am standing right there, okay, in Buzzardroost Rock right now. Can you see me? And just a little bit of history. This block that we're standing on right now is about 70 feet, sheer vertical there. So if I were to, I'm just gonna reach the camera out a little bit, see what I can see out there. I don't even know what it looks like until I view this footage. There's a fence here, of course. I'm well behind, so I'm just giving you a feel for what that looks like down there. Okay. All right, about 70 feet. Nice tiger swallowtail just flew. And again, this whole region they call the edge of Appalachia preserves. And that is because we are literally right on the border of the Appalachian Plateau, the Appalachian foothills, and the western part of Ohio that was glaciated. Parts of Adams County were glaciated, parts were not, and glaciated at different times. And because of that, part of that geologic variation is why there's such floristic variation and variation in animal and insect and bird species that come through here. Okay, here's a little bit more about the vultures. Okay, black and turkey vultures. All right, so now out here, there's no seating, there's no bench seating, but there's a little back there. I think I'll retreat and talk a little bit more. But I'm seeing there's a very beautiful, healthy blue ash over the edge right there, blowing in the wind. Some red cedars, red bud. And then one interesting thing, I talked about this at Clifton Gorge, is cliff edges can be refuges for prairie species too, because this cliff edge is maintained in an open condition by the weather, by nature. And that gives a refuge for these things like grasses and various forbs that need open areas to thrive. So it's just kind of interesting that cliff edges can be refuges for prairie species. All right, and I'm seeing that all around here. Now we're not able to see it, but down in the valley is the Ohio Brush Creek, and that will flow into the Ohio River, which is not too far in the distance south of me here. I don't know the exact mileage. But yeah, beautiful, beautiful sight. Very comfortable day to be here too. If it were 95 degrees, it'd be a different story, which it gets to be here, plenty. All right. Okay, I'm going to retreat up the trail, see what else I see, maybe stop and talk a little bit. So I thought I'd just sit here until my battery dies. I did bring a second battery this time, though, on Buzzardroost Rock, because it's just so pleasant out here. And just to reflect on nature a little bit and what it means to me, and in particular what it meant to me over the pandemic. And so the last time I was here, I think, was about 3 years ago, during the heart of the pandemic. In fact, it might have been 4 years ago, and where basically everything was closed down and you couldn't go anywhere, and you know, people felt trapped inside their homes. But actually nature was still open, and that's where I went. I retreated to nature. And so I spent a great deal of time outdoors, even more than I normally do. I've done this my whole life, but I really made an effort to get outside that year and document what I was seeing and sharing it with people, just mostly on, you know, social media in picture form. And it really wasn't until last year, right, that I started doing this. And so I just want to reflect on this place. This was one of the places I visited that year, and it was really important. It was fairly early. I think it was late April, maybe a few weeks before the time I'm here now, but just about the same time. And it was just a very important getaway at that time. And so I just kind of want to reflect on that. It's just so peaceful right here. I can't hear any highways. I can't hear people. I hear birds. The wind is blowing softly. And it's just you know, you could take a nap right here. I just may when I'm done. And I've seen nobody else today too. That's the thing. I'm here on a Thursday, and midday on a Thursday, I see a zebra swallowtail flying. Maybe it'll come and join us on camera. And so it's a great day to have this place to yourself. Here comes the zebra swallowtail. It got near me and flew away. Try to catch that on camera later. But yeah, just there are these places, even in places like Ohio, where you can get away from everybody. And this is a good one, especially on off days. Here's a delicate little flower blowing in the wind right now. This is called blue-eyed grass. Okay, so it grows it can grow in the open. It's quite shady where it is right now. Okay, but it's a forest understory, of course, but near the edge. So nice, pretty plant in the lily family called blue-eyed grass. Here's one of the bigger trees I've seen today. It's our old friend chestnut oak. You can see here that this is the edge of a former private property. Actually, it might be fenced off somewhat because there's a cliff edge out there they probably want to keep people away from. But this is a tough old tree that is a survivor. So this scar right here that you see, that's the scar of a lightning strike that healed on this tree. And so it basically would go the whole way up to wherever the lightning hit, broke open the bark, but it healed. It's still in there. That's a tough one. That's a big one too. I don't have my measuring tape with me, but that's a survivor. Right down the trail a bit is another one, another big one. Not quite, maybe not quite as tall. I guess it is. It's a big one at the base too. So let's take a look at that. These big survivor chestnut. You know, these are old partly because of where they grow. They're in these thin soils on these ridge tops, battered by wind out here on the edge of more or less the edge of a cliff. See below me, there's, you know, cliffs down below. And here's another big old survivor. Chestnut oak growing out here. I love these old gnarly trees. Okay, I'm going to push my way back to the parking lot, and I have at least one more plant I'm going to show you on the way. Well, I lied. I'm going to show you two more plants on the way at least. This plant is called four-leaved milkweed. Nice white, sort of pinkish cast to the buds, but white flowers. This is a woodland milkweed. It grows in fairly shady areas, but it's called four-leaved milkweed because at each node there are 4 leaves that come out at the node. All right, so hopefully you can see that there. Okay, flowering right now. Well, there's always more to see. So this is just a nice little overlook of this prairie, formerly farmed area that's been maintained as prairie. So it gives you a feel for that. And I see in the distance right there, a chinkapin oak associated with limestone soils. In front of me is a shrub. This is a sumac species called winged sumac. Okay, because the compound leaves here have little wings along the main rachis where the leaflets come off. Okay, there are little wings there. And it's very glossy. Okay, so that's winged sumac. All right, now we're going to look for my one last plant out here in this open area. And I think that will be it for the day if I can find it. I'll just keep things running. Take a little walk here through the red cedars and red buds, dogwoods. See if I can find my species. I saw one earlier. I might end up showing you the very first one I saw. Yeah, I better save some battery to go find it. Well, I bypassed this plant earlier because I thought I would find more, maybe bigger specimens. But here I am. This is the original one I found. This plant holds the name of probably my favorite name of a plant. It's called Hoary Puccoon. H-O-A-R-Y, Puccoon, P-U-C-C-O-O-N. It's crazy. Anyhow, I think I missed the peak of their flowering, which would have been a week or two ago here. But I only have seen a couple here in this prairie meadow, but there it is. This is one of the highlights you can see when you visit Buzzardroost. Okay, and with that, it's threatening to rain now. So what I'm gonna do is basically just hightail it back to the parking area and sign off for the day at this hike in Adams County to Buzzardroost Rock. So this is a naturalist signing off. See you next time. Bye-bye.